Welcome to Work Life by Design. I'm your host, Mel Marsden. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that change is inevitable and we no longer need to go to work to work. As a workplace dynamic strategist and the founder of Community, I draw back the curtains on my own business, the clients and projects that we deliver, along with tapping into the knowledge and insights from academics, business leaders and champions of change. I believe that our environments have the power to positively influence our behaviour and performance, inspiring our human potential. Hello and welcome back to episode 91 of the Work Life by Design podcast. Now today I want to be sharing with you a little bit of an insight into how I went about managing my business while I welcomed the birth of my son, Nash. As I mentioned to you back in the first episode for this season, which was welcome back for season 5, I mentioned that I had prepared a pretty exhaustive plan around how I was going to manage that re-entry back into the business. And if you go back to the end of season 4, I also shared with you my plan for that whole period of time in my episode there about Off to Babyland. When I was preparing prior to me going on mat leave with my son, I had been engaging with a number of different people who had been through similar situations that were welcoming a baby while running a business, trying to understand how they'd gone about that, what they'd done, who they'd hired, what their process for that was. And so I used all of that information to start to prepare my own plan. So today I want to sort of check in with you and just share how it all went. And the reason I want to do that is because it's not always going to be possible to ramp down your business or bring someone in to take the reins. Now, that's what I had anticipated when I was first planning to, welcome my son into the world. I wanted to take 3 months off and I was going to hire an operations manager and I was going to elevate my team to fill in that gap and so that I could actually take that 3-month break. However, it didn't quite all work out that way. And the reason I want to share this with you too is because it may be that, you're yourself welcoming a baby into the family. Perhaps you've got a 6th family member where you're going to need to step out of your business for a period of time. Maybe you're having to take on a carer's role, which is going to limit your ability to be able to work in your business for a period of time. So really, whatever your circumstances are, there are going to be times when you can't be all in on your business. And so this was one of those times for me. And I just really want to share with you what I did to prepare myself for that process, because it's not how I anticipated it going, but it's something that I found really actually quite liberating to go through as well. So today's going to be a bit of a run sheet on how I managed my whole business through that time. Now, to give you a bit of a recap on that situation so that you've got some context of where we're heading, Nash was born in May of this year, so 2022, mid-May. I had started trying to recruit for an operations manager to join my business back in November 2021. Obviously, I had 9 months to plan for this. I knew that I was wanting to take that time out. So I went to market looking to find someone else who could step in as that sort of 2IC role to support me through that period of time. Now, that was an unsuccessful pursuit. We didn't actually find anyone to step into that role, which actually then resulted in some of my team members stepping out of the business. And that happened in around late Feb. So I really had 3 months between that and when I was planning on having this baby to kind of work out what I wanted to do. So I had that 3 months to really restructure the business and prep for that time. Through this period of time, I still had my core team to support me, but there was still quite a number of functions and roles and tasks and activities that I did that required my unique skill set to be able to contribute and to keep the ship afloat throughout that period. So I was still very, very hands-on with a number of projects, which meant that I couldn't fully step out of the business for any long period of time. But I also know that, welcoming a baby, that your time is going to be quite finite, and I really wanted to spend as much time as I possibly could with my new baby because I knew this was going to be my last baby. I hadn't had that opportunity to have an extended period of mat leave with my first 2 children either. So I really wanted to make the most of this period of time. And I wanted to spend as much time as possible in that baby bubble and really soaking up all those gorgeous little newborn cuddles. I also didn't know whether I was going to have a sleeper or not. And so I had to get really crystal clear on what I would and what I wouldn't be doing once I had my baby. In that episode, Off to Babyland, I really talk about how I started preparing my business for a baby, and I talk about it as actually being quite a gift. Now, I see it as being a gift because it was really such a fresh start in so many ways for me to be able to redesign my business. So often we are sort of, going along doing what we do, and we continue to do what we do because that's what we already, the wheels are in motion. We've got this perpetual cycle that's happening, and we just keep progressing forward. And, I talk about this in my Live a Life by Design program, is that, this is a time where we need to check in regularly and see if, are we still heading where we wanted to be heading? And I'm not immune to this situation either, is we can sometimes get stuck just doing what we've always done and not taking that time to step back and actually look at what's happening. Is it still working for us? Is it still where we want to be heading? And is this really what I want to be doing? And so this was actually a really good opportunity for me to just stop and reevaluate and go, well, what do I actually want to be doing? Now, I'm going to share that whole process with you in another episode because there's a whole lot of content in that just in itself. And there's quite a detailed process that I went through in determining what that needed to look like. And so at that sort of critical point, I had really two options. I could go back out to the market and I could hire some team who, could step in and take on some of those roles from the team members that had opted out of the business. But in doing so, I would be bringing people in. I'd still have to train them. I'd still have to provide that oversight to them. And I really only had sort of 3 months to do that. So that was one option. Or I could try something completely different. And so I actually chose option B. I decided to look at this as a fresh perspective and a fresh opportunity to start to really look at, well, what do I want to do with my business and how do I want to manage this time? So one of the first things that I did was I had to start to say no to any new prospective clients. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending how you want to look at this, I actually had a very strong pipeline of work that needed to be delivered during that period of, welcoming a new baby into the world. And the pro of that is I had plenty of work to be able to do, but the con of that was that I wasn't able to step back from the business for any long period of time because these projects needed to be delivered. And I was the best person that was going to be positioned to do that. So that was kind of the situation that I had to deal with. And so by saying no to any potential new clients coming on board, I was ensuring that I wasn't going to be overloading myself more than I needed to be. And, that's pretty critical in this period of time. If you've got a brand new baby, you've got existing work that needs to be delivered, you've already got two very high priorities that you need to be delivering on. And so adding any new projects into the mix on that would have made things quite a lot more challenging. Now, the second thing that I did was I had to really look at what activities I could potentially outsource. Which parts of a project, both short-term and long-term, could I get external support with to be able to make sure that they were all delivered to the highest level of quality that I would expect my clients to receive. And so what I did then was I actually went out and I attacked this in two different ways. I brought in some contract team members to help do specific tasks and to cover me specifically in that first 2 to 4 week period because, you've had a baby, you're still physically recovering, you're, learning to adapt to a new little human and look after them, and they've got some pretty specific needs that are going to need to happen. So I'm not necessarily going to be on my A game in those first 2 to 4 weeks. So I wanted to make sure that I had the right support network around me to be able to ensure that technically my projects were still going to be supported and delivered outside of what my core team could actually deliver. So fortunately, we have a really great resource network in terms of very experienced and skilled contract staff that we can work with. And so I brought in one of my good friends and a very experienced designer to come and help me through those first few weeks where she picked up my load and just made sure that my projects sort of kept ticking and the wheels kept turning in the right direction through that period of time. I also had a number of different CAD technicians supporting us as well. So just to ensure that documentation was being updated, that any details that were needed were provided, and that any adjustments that required to happen were happening pretty promptly. So we had to have that sort of set in stone and ready to go from that outset point. And then the second part of that was I went and I engaged with a project management firm to start to take on some of the project delivery load. So we had 2 projects that were completely documented, totally tendered, so everyone knew exactly who was going to be working on the team, what they were building, knew what the scope was. And so it was a really clean point for me to be able to hand that over and bring in a project management partner to take ownership of that next phase of the project while they were in construction. This was one of the best things that I did to alleviate some of my time, because they were then able to step in and manage the day-to-day of those projects and make sure that RFIs were communicated to, that project programs were managed, that budgets were kept on track. So they managed all of that technical side of things. And then I was still available to jump in if it was needed. If there's this particular question that I needed to answer or some more information that was needed historically regarding the project, I could do that, but they were carrying the bulk of the load. And the third thing that I did was I really needed to get a really clear plan on how I was actually going to manage myself and how I could then actually communicate that with my wider team. So that was both my core team and my external team that I had built to help sort of, buffer me through this period. And that plan covered off everything from key dates, expectations of how I was going to actually spend my time in what chunks, who to contact for what, and what I could actually be contacted for. So there's quite a lot of detail that went into this plan to make sure that everybody knew exactly what I was doing, what I was available for, and what everyone else that was participating in those projects could be contacted for, and what information they would have if and when it was needed. I am interrupting this episode with a very special announcement. I am so excited to tell you that my book, The Next Workplace: Designing Dynamic Environments That Inspire Human Potential, will be released early next year. This book has been in the making for a few years now and brings together all my knowledge, research, and insights on what it takes to design a dynamic workplace. A workplace that is agile, adaptable, and responsive to its users. A place that comes alive and has a gravitational pull that just draws people in. This book connects the concepts of modern day management theory to the structural design of our physical workplace environments, aligning, enabling, and inspiring the human potential of every organisation. To check it out and grab your copy, just head over to my website, melissamarsden.com.au/book. So in that plan, I kind of broke it out into 2 periods of time. The first period was the first 2 weeks after my baby Nash was born, and then the next one was the 6 weeks after that again. So this covered off a full 8-week period after the birth of my baby. So in that first 2 weeks, some of the things that I had actually set in stone was that I was not to be contactable at all. I really wanted to be 100% in that baby bottle. And to prepare for that, I really needed to make sure that my clients knew that that was happening, and that my team knew that that was happening as well, and that everybody had everything that they would need, all the information, all of the answers, all of the tasks that they were going to require for that 2-week period, so that I could ensure that that time was completely protected for myself. The way that I actually managed that in specific detail was I had no access to email. I completely turned my email off, my out of office was on, and I actually even deleted the apps from my phone. So I deleted my email and I deleted Teams, so that I wasn't getting any pings or notifications, or I wasn't even tempted to sort of jump in and see what was going on in the business or who had been contacting me. I'd completely disconnected through that period of time. Now, I didn't do that and just kind of let it all go and, hope for the best. I had my wonderful EA monitoring my inbox, and we had set up a system that if anything that was absolutely 100% urgent, she had permission to be able to forward that to another email address that she had been given, so that I would know that that needed to be attended to because it was something that was, highly critical. And we set some parameters around that, and I'll sort of share with those of you in a minute. But I also made sure that I wasn't taking any phone calls. So I didn't answer my phone unless I knew who was calling me, and usually it was friends or family in that period of time. And I'd put my voicemail on advising that I was, welcoming the birth of our new baby, and that I was uncontactable, and who to contact in that period of time as well. So, I had very clear parameters around what I was going to do and how I was going to manage it. And mainly that was because of me, because I love working. And so I had to be able to manage those situations and, my own expectations to kind of control that bubble for myself, and to be held accountable by others around me as well, because I announced this pretty loudly and proudly with my team that this is how it was going to be. I'd announced it with my clients as well. And so then I was being held accountable by them to ensure that I actually stuck to that plan. Within that plan, I also made sure that for each project that was happening at the time, that everyone knew who was in charge and what phase of that project it was in. So by doing this, everyone knew exactly what was going on, they knew where things were at, and they knew who they should be talking to if they needed any information or support through that process as well. I also prepped Claire, my EA, on how to actually respond to any of these emails that might be coming in. So we had really clearly defined email scripts written out on, how to handle new project inquiries and, what to do if a client contacted about us an existing proposal or an existing project. And, that I would reply to those things when I returned from my 2-week bubble. So we had agreements in place around how things were going to happen. But we also had an emergency plan. So this was kind of like the break glass in case of emergency. There were 4 things that Claire was empowered to be able to break glass in. And the first one was, it was an issue that no one else can solve, and it couldn't wait until that 2-week period was over. So she had the complete authority to make that call and determine whether or not she felt that it was something that needed my attention or it didn't need my attention, and it could wait, and she could communicate that. But she also had, the ability to contact me if that break glass needed to happen. The second thing was, it was a business issue. So there was something to do with compliance, accounting, or legal that had escalated that needed to be dealt with by me and nobody else. The third thing was payroll, if we couldn't pre-organise it and we were able to. So that took one of those 4 things away completely before we even got there. And the fourth thing was just generally, if shit was on fire, she could contact me because, we wanted to make sure that the place didn't burn down while I was away. So we were very clear around what those, break glass and in case of emergency situations could be, and that she could then contact me if she so felt she needed. So that was the first 2 weeks, and that's how we kind of managed that period of time. And then the next chunk of time I blocked out was for 6 weeks after that. So this would get me until my baby was 8 weeks old. Similarly, we went through and we set out a process for this as well. And so that second 6 weeks that we had there, with regards to my email, I just made sure that I didn't check my email. We abided by those same set of rules, that Claire was triaging my inbox and that she was keeping an eye on it. And if anything was coming up, she would send me a daily update on Teams on anything that I actually needed to attend to. And so she was kind of managing that and making sure that it was really clear what I needed to look at and what I didn't. And we also updated my out of office reply to say that I was on limited access and to still contact Claire through that period of time. I also kept the voicemail on my phone, which if I didn't answer, people would then contact Claire and make sure that they got through. The other thing that was different around this period of time is I actually set out the things that I will do and the things that I won't do. And again, this was more around me communicating to myself and setting those boundaries around how I was going to be intentionally spending this time. The things that I will do, I actually had 3 projects that were critical to my input. I had a strategy that needed to be completed that was waiting on some data from the client to come back. I had one major project in construction that required my attendance, and this became my main role through that period of time. And then I also had another project that also required my construction attendance, but it was more so as on a required basis and more so in terms of a client relationship process as well. So they're the 3 key things that I was going to be doing through that next 6 weeks. Now, all the other projects had been completely redistributed or reprogrammed to occur after this period of time. So we had a really clear expectation around what I would do and what I wouldn't do, and how long that was going to last for, and exactly what I was going to be doing. So we had to minimize that because, with a new baby, you don't know what to expect and you don't know how your time's going to get used. So you have to be really quite protective and finite around that time. Now, I also laid out what I won't do. And so I had rules that I had imposed on myself, and then I asked others to keep me accountable to these. And this is because I enjoy working, but what happens is I will overcommit myself and I'll then start to feel extremely overwhelmed. So this was a way of not getting to that point by ensuring that these boundaries were put in place. And so we agreed that during that 6-week period that I would take on no new projects. So that means no new proposals, no project inquiries, and no kickoffs of any type in that period of time. It also meant that I wasn't going to be doing any meetings, any coffee dates, or any business development, because we've agreed that I'm not going to be taking on any more project inquiries, so there's no need for those either. I also stripped out any daily huddles. Now, this is one that I did to protect my own time because I really wanted to still keep that baby bubble around me, and I didn't want to be checking in every single day to see where things are at. I mean, I still had phone calls with my team when they needed me, but the daily huddles were something that was left to the team to run without me. I also set a parameter around no meetings before 10 a.m. Now, new baby, 4-year-old and an almost 12-year-old still had to get to school throughout this period. We were adjusting to new routines. So I just made sure that I wasn't going to be having to stress myself out and be rushing out the door to get everyone to school and everyone ready and then, get off to work if I was starting earlier than 10. So I just gave myself that flexibility and that space to make sure that I didn't turn into this rushed woman and this crazy lady trying to get ready and get everything happening before 10 a.m. That is one that I've tried to keep too, by the way, because it just gives me that little bit of space in the mornings to not feel like I'm completely slammed. I also said no to general emails and general calls during that time because they needed to be actionable and necessary for the projects that were happening. Otherwise, they were just, it's kind of like noise that I didn't need to be taking up that precious time that I had with my bub. So that's how we kind of scheduled that out. That's how I ran the first 8 weeks of Bub being born. But to do all of this, I had to be really quite prepared. So there's a lot of work that I needed to do before I even went and had my baby for this whole process to actually work. Now, the first one was to make sure that payroll happened. So we basically forecasted what everyone's hours and times were going to be, and we got the payroll system happened. We then automated that in the banking. So that was all taken care of. We also had to make sure that the end of month accounts at the end of May were already sorted as well. So we did that before I left. I had those canned emails, those email scripts that we spoke about as well. So I had to write all of those, highlight the sections that Claire could adapt to suit the particular proposal or conversation that she was responding to. I had to have all my out of offices done and ready to be scheduled. And I needed to make sure that my clients actually knew what was happening, when I was going to be back, and who to call when I wasn't around. So we had all of that communication that needed to happen as well. So this is all the preparation that went into actually making this work. And so, here we are 5-6 months later. How did it all go? Well, I have to say it actually went pretty well. It certainly wasn't the 3 months off that I had anticipated and, being completely disconnected from the business, but it really was the best outcome that I could have hoped for given the circumstances in the situation, and I love working. So it wasn't completely awful for me. I love being involved in my business and, I got to do that and I got to have my baby with me. He would come to the office with me. He came to a couple of meetings with us as well. So, wherever I went, he went. So it was really very quite flexible in that period. And, my amazing EA Claire jumped in and she helped me look after him for the first few months as well. So if I had to go to a meeting, she would take care of him, or if I needed to get some work done, she would look after him, so that was a possibility for me as well. So he was around constantly. So it's not like I had to part with him full time through that period. He was just around and kind of blended in with what was going on. And I just had to sort of juggle and make the most of it as we went. Like I said, I needed these boundaries because I'm quite happy to take on more and more, and I needed other people to hold me accountable by having this plan in place and enabling me to actually act on it. Now, the other thing that I had actually set myself to do through this whole period was to finish my book. And, in hindsight, that was probably a crazy idea to think that I was going to have my book completed. I was actually intending to have it finished, published, and be on a book tour in September. But, reality kind of struck pretty early. And so I've pushed that out. As this is coming out, I will have finished all of the writing. It is now fully in design, and we are planning the release of that in February, March next year, 2023. So super excited to have that happen. But had I continued to sort of push forward and try and achieve that deadline that I had set myself, I probably would be in a crumbled heap in the corner, rocking back and forth. So I'm glad I let that deadline slip. But, that was one of the parts of the process that I had to do. I had to be a little bit more realistic. I had to reprioritize things, and I really had to shift my expectations of what was achievable and what was not. And I'd love to think I'm Superwoman, but the reality is I'm not, and there's only so much that I can actually do. And I needed to make that space for myself so I didn't have that nervous breakdown. So here we are, we're 6 months later, and while my weeks are still reasonably full at the moment, it's also generally quite fluid. So I've got a nanny now 3 days a week who supports me. Again, wherever I go though, Nash comes with me. So it's not like I'm having to part with him for periods of time. She's just here to help me look after him so that I can work. I've also got my EA still helping me out 1 day a week with looking after Nash. So that's a big thank you to Claire there for being so flexible to help me to do that and be so willing. That was, just an amazing opportunity for me to have that support. I still try not to work Fridays, although Friday tends to be like clean up and admin day. But, that's also a day that I have a little bit more breathing room and flexibility. So there's no meetings, and I use that time for us. And, as I said earlier, I still rather not start work before 10 because I just feel like that gives me that breathing room to be able to not feel pressured and rushed to get to work every morning. And I still don't have access to my emails on my phone, which would have terrified me 6 months ago, but it's actually really quite liberating because it's another one of those unconscious distractions that you'll tend to do as you're sitting there and you sort of, I'll still check in on social media, but I would be checking in on my emails. And the bonus of not having those on my phone now is that I don't have those little anxiety attacks of reading something and then thinking like I have to act on it immediately. By only having my emails available to me on my laptop, I'm sitting down, I'm in a process that I have the space and capacity to actually respond and action any of those items that are coming through. So that's afforded me a lot more room as well. So that's probably a tip that I would suggest trying. If your emails are a little bit unwieldy or you find that yourself checking in and then trying to action those things immediately, that's one that I think you can jump on pretty quickly. So look, these are all the little ways that I really protected my time so that I could spend as much time as possible in that baby bubble with Nash. But it was also so that I can show up at 110% for my clients and deliver to the expected levels that I would want to be giving them. If I didn't make these protective time barriers around myself, I wouldn't be able to deliver on my projects to the expected levels and still keep my family functioning. So these were really critical to seeing this time become quite successful. Now, this may not be someone else's idea of perfect, and in many ways it's not my idea of perfect either, but it was the perfect solution for us given the situation that we had and where we were at. So that's it for today. I hope that this has shed a little light on how you could potentially implement a plan to support your business through welcoming a baby or for any other reason that you might need to take some sporadic leave from your business. It certainly helped me having this clear plan of attack because I then didn't have that anxiety later of trying to do things that I hadn't pre-communicated. Everything was planned out. Everyone knew what was happening and we just got on with it. So that's it for this week. We'll be back again next week with another great guest interview. I'll be interviewing Dr. Kate Byrne about how we can be creating change successfully in our businesses. So tune in for that one. But until then, I'll see you then.